Hey everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a dungeon master that cancels a Dungeons & Dragons campaign due to a bard player not playing up the bard stereotype. A story about how a dungeon master accidentally instilled a fear of crabs to his players, and much more. But before we begin, I have to ask that if you enjoy the video, that you leave a like and consider subscribing. If not for me, then may I tempt you with some kitties. Kitties always get likes, right? But with that said, let's get into some D&D horror story cringe. Dungeon Master cancels game because my bard wasn't a real bard. By Reddit user C14693. A couple years back, at the height of COVID shutdowns, I joined a Roll20 plus Discord to start getting back into Dungeons & Dragons. I managed to get myself into a game and was hyped. I created a male half-elf bard. The other party members was a male half-orc monk, female Eladrin elf rogue, a male human fighter, and a female furbolg barbarian. The party got along well, and we introduced our characters to one another in a session 0 at level 1, with a mini-quest the DM put together to see how we would interact and how well we would roleplay. I introduced my bard as being a musician who wants to improve his musical talents. His main focus would be adventuring with other would-be heroes in hopes of putting together an epic ballad that would last the ages. He was not against any fornication and would gladly accept the offer from a beautiful woman, but he would not take part in simping for hopes of sexual favors. I played him off as a proper gentleman, chivalry and humility, and everyone liked the concept. The Session 0 mini-quest was a rather long side mission that was almost deadly, as we were sent to clear out a goblin den. We failed stealth checks, and my bard was somehow thrust into a 1v1 situation with a goblin boss. Remember, we are level 1, who stuck to my character like glue. With sheer luck and use of dodge actions to keep goblin boss occupied, we managed to separate the other goblins into different mobs and cut them down. The barbarian tanked most of the mob attacks, and the rogue was critically hit, going down instantly. My bard utilized his 2 spell slots to cast Healing Word at the right times to save the barbarian and rogue from outright dying, all the while dodging and keeping the goblin boss busy. We win the battle of attrition and level up. After the fight, Dungeon Master takes note of my spell uses and immediately comments that for a bard not simping, he's only helping the female player characters with his heals. I state that they were the only characters that he could see with the dynamic light settings and the cramped tunnel system in that current situation. Besides, it was the party who told me to heal the specific characters, so how was it simping? Dungeon Master just says, "Okay, whatever," and laughs it off. Several sessions in, the party was having a good time with the shenanigans, despite the serious nature of the module. Through roleplay, my bard had a couple nights of romance with the rogue. She did state that she saw this only as a skinship, and that there were no romantic feelings involved. I said I didn't mind, since romance was not in his purview at the moment. However, my bard would not treat her poorly, nor look at her differently, just because she was very open with her sexuality. He was a gentleman after all. The Dungeon Master seemed annoyed that my bard didn't try to force a development of romance, nor chase the other female player character to, quote, conquer. He even tried throwing sexy NPCs at my bard's feet. In character, I accepted their words of praise, but did not go out of my way to recite love poems, nor flirt aggressively. I remained humble, courteous, and acted like a gentleman, not a horn dog. The Dungeon Master went into an angry rant after another session, telling me that I was playing the bard wrong. His idea of bards are like horny men or women who just want to go around sleeping with everything that walked on 2 legs. He even told me that I should be playing bards like Critical Role Scanlan. Don't get me wrong, I love the character Scanlan. I consider this character the best one in Season 1 of Critical Role. But I tell him that just because Sam Riegel and other streamers played a bard this way, doesn't mean I should follow suit. I let him finish and follow up with a bunch of questions. Why can't a bard be normal? Do male bards always have to think with their dick? Why is it that bards must always be seen as gigolos and whores? Is it okay for other players to tell me how I should play my character? Did I tell you how to DM? Is chivalry dead? Can a bard not be a gentleman or proper woman? Did you make my bard for me? Does it hurt your feelings when I play my bard this way? If so, why does it hurt you? Are you my bard character in real life? The following week, he tells us that the game is over, as he was now mentally stressed out and would no longer DM for us. TLDR. My bard is not a horny bard, so he's not a real bard. Dungeon Master rants and quits DMing after his idea of a bard is questioned. I don't know why so many players and Dungeon Masters insist on bards only being able to be played as the meme stereotype, and for the Dungeon Master to be upset that OP wasn't throwing himself at every character that showed interest would get annoying, especially when bringing up Critical Role and saying OP should play his character more like Scanlan. Now, I do have to say that OP may have been a bit condescending when throwing those litany of questions at the Dungeon Master. Perhaps he could have just talked to the Dungeon Master out of game and politely explain why he doesn't want to play the character that way. Though, in the end, it didn't really matter, since the Dungeon Master dropped the game entirely. Let's move on. Edgelord Player refuses to break character during breaks and downtime. By Reddit user Expert Individual 185. I went to a Hammerhead game store last night, and overall had a lot of fun. But the guy I sat next to was so effing weird, bro. He played this Dark Elf Wizard, which I'd usually be fine with, but he took it way too far. First, he didn't even meet a lot of the requirements. He didn't have a mini, and he had an evil character. But the Dungeon Master was nice, so he let it slide. But then more red flags started popping up. For one, he spoke in this deadpan voice, and calling us, quote, mortals, like an edgy 12-year-old on a COD lobby. And he also said that he doesn't want to remember our names, which I thought was rude as F. He said that he had no empathy, which made my eyes roll to the back of my head. He heavily hinted that his character was racist towards dwarves, and that there was a dwarf player in the party. He also made vague threats to every party member, especially me because I was sitting next to him. And then, he had the audacity to call my character edgy. Sure, he was pretty edgy, but that was so effing rich coming from a guy whose character is a racist pyromaniac. I really hope that he doesn't come back next week. Man, I almost cut myself on all of that edge. Now, edgy characters can be interesting, but for this dude to act like that out of game towards the players is just rude and condescending, especially the part when he said that he didn't care about anyone's names. It reminds me of the story where Jared Leto stayed in character during the filming of Suicide Squad, and everyone else on set hated it. Hopefully, OP's hope that that player doesn't come back comes to fruition. Otherwise, perhaps have the Dungeon Master have a talk with him about tabletop RPG etiquette. On to the next one. So, I made my whole party afraid of crabs, accidentally. By Reddit user BlueStrikeX. So, I'm one of those forever DMs, as people are used to me dealing with the DMing part, to the point that I haven't played in years. I have my own homebrew world, but most of the content is pretty vanilla for the most part, just having its own lore and mythos. We had a pretty small party at the moment, because we were trying to teach a newbie D&D, so I wasn't really going that hard. My players usually really like how my campaigns tend to be challenging, but doable. In this case, they were 3 people: a cleric orc, a custom lineage paladin, and a tiefling warlock, the newbie. The last one wasn't really paying attention to the campaign, except to do dumb things, and ended up having issues because of that. They tried to annoy a very old wizard lady that guarded a village, and ended up muted for a while, but then decided to chop her own neck to talk through the hole. Well, talk about drastic measures. But we mostly ignored her weird, funny acts, because we knew she really wasn't into it, and that she was going to abandon the game pretty soon. It's just one of those things that you can notice. So, the other 2, carrying the game, get to an enchanted mansion, searching for a Dark Lord that was their enemy. They start investigating the whole building, and get into a room full of mechanical crabs, that were apparently an experiment of the Dark Lord, that was an artificer. Before someone asks, they were just reskinned giant crabs. Nothing special about them. They just looked like machines instead of common crabs. There were like 12 of them, I think. They were at level 3, and they weren't really forced to do battle with the crabs. The little guys were just kinda chillin'. They just had to go pick up an item on the other side of the room and leave. But of course, the cleric orc decides to ram in because, quote, "They're just crabs." The rest of the party joins, believing the same. The horror ensues when the party is surrounded by crabs that somehow land natural 20s every 3 attacks or so, with a lot of the attacks somehow surpassing an AC of 21 that the cleric orc had. Fun fact, I'm someone that's unlucky to an extreme point with my rolls. Most enemies tend to fail in the most pathetic way, in the worst moment, except for these crabs. So the cleric orc, that already had to use the racial trait to not die after falling from a cliff, falls to the ground. Then again after the paladin heals her, then again, until they start panicking, because the warlock had no spells for covering a wide area, and no one else had anything either. They made it, somehow, and the campaign continued. But now, we are ignoring this one, and jumping to another campaign, where a character related to the previous Dark Lord had some of these mechanical crabs, and again, sends a group of 4, with a couple of zombies Frankenstein style, to fight the party. The party, with 3 new members, yes, now a party of 5, decides to focus on the zombies, not seeing the crabs as an issue. And then it happens, again, somehow, for some reason. The zombies do practically nothing except, well, not dying, and the crabs keep on rolling natural 20s and 2 high rolls. This party had 2 full armored paladins and a warrior, so let's say I was a little shocked when the 2 members of the party that died from the crabs were the 2 paladins. After that, whenever a crab showed up, my players instantly started panicking, looking for ways to deal with the quote, monster, their words, not mine, as fast as they could. And yes, there are even more examples of the crabs just beating tough parties in very small groups, even when they stopped underestimating them. Like that one time, someone decided to throw burning hands at a group of them that were ignoring the party, and they all passed the rolls just to drop that player character's HP to 0 when the combat really started. If I could say something positive about this, it's that I decided to make a campaign centered around a crab god for them, and they're literally crapping their pants every session. And no, it's not a horror campaign, it's just a common campaign, but they just shiver whenever they see a combat with crabs coming. Only in Dungeons & Dragons, or games like it, can instill a fear such as this. Sometimes, the dice just go away that you wouldn't think that they would. I can actually relate to OP's players here, as in my campaign, my rogue was nearly killed by being dragged under the ocean by a giant crab once our party made it to a haunted island. and he would have been killed if it wasn't for my ring of water walking and a necklace that allowed water breathing, because that crab was really laying into my squishy ranged rogue. But I digress. At least this group has learned not to underestimate crabs, and now have a campaign where the BBEG is a god crab. On to the following story. My Tale of Betrayal and Discomfort by Reddit user I Love Justine. Last night's D&D 5th edition session left me completely miserable, and I just need to vent about what happened. I'm a female player in a mostly male group. We've been playing for a few months now, and everything seemed fine until our last session. Our dungeon master, let's call him Dave, has always been a bit intense, but I never expected him to cross the line like he did. We were in the middle of a crucial battle, and my character, a rogue, was in a tight spot. That's when Dave announced that my character had been captured by the enemy leader, a vile sorcerer. What happened next was just appalling. Instead of a typical capture scenario, Dave described in graphic detail how the sorcerer began to torment and degrade my character in a very gender-specific and inappropriate way. I was stunned. I looked around for support from my fellow players, but they seemed just as shocked and unsure of what to do. I tried to steer the scenario back to the game by suggesting escape plans, but Dave just kept adding more disturbing elements to the situation. It felt like he was getting a kick out of making me uncomfortable. I finally had enough, stood up, and told him that this was not acceptable. Instead of apologizing, he accused me of not being able to handle a, quote, realistic RPG experience. I left the session and haven't decided if I'll go back. This experience has really soured me on the whole group. RPGs are supposed to be fun, not a platform for someone's disturbing fantasies. Has anyone else experienced something like this? How did you handle it? Man, that really sucks. To have a game going that you're enjoying for months, only for the Dungeon Master to pull something like that out of left field. Then, when OP aired her grievances about that type of thing happening, and for the Dungeon Master to respond with telling OP that she can't handle a, quote, realistic RPG experience, isn't only idiotic, but insulting to OP. As far as OP going back to the game, normally I would say to try to talk to the DM about why it made you uncomfortable. But with the way that he reacted to OP when she stood up for herself, I would say maybe it would be best to just write off that game and try to find another table. Though, what would you all suggest? Let's move on. Bang Her or She Dies by Reddit user Desperate Landlady. The title is an exaggeration, but that's how it felt at the time. I still like this group, and we're still playing together, but this one situation was quite something. This is from the same group as Sir Loveless, by the way. Oh yeah, I covered that one. If you're interested, be sure to check out this video here, and I'll try to remember to leave a link to it in the pinned comment. But with that said, on to the story. We are now a few weeks into playing together, still as a three-man party consisting of the DM, Rogue, a quiet tabaxi player, Cleric, a dwarf worshipping a homebrew love goddess, and Warlock, me. We are now in a part of the story where we got swept up into local politics. Basically, the Crown are the good guys, being screwed over by the nobles that want to squeeze the populace for every coin possible. We gained the trust of the king, and so he tasked us with an important mission to escort a team of spies and specialists to another city. Basically, something about us being unknown to the nobility would keep the team safer than the King's Guard. So we head out, and what do you know? We immediately get ambushed by a ton of bandits. Not much issue for our party since we're level 5 now, and I start slinging fireballs from my fiend patron spell list. Some of the bandits try surrendering, but we had decided that it's not worth keeping them alive, and that we'd rather reap some juicy XP. So we get to the last bandit, and the dungeon master says, "She is like, please don't kill me. I'll do anything you want. You can have my body. Anything." And now I feel really bad about it, because in my mind, this poor girl would lower herself that much just to stay alive. So I tell the others that I don't want to take advantage of her. Rogue says, "So then we kill her, like the rest?" I say, "No, just let her go. While she is cute, it wouldn't be consensual anyway." The dungeon master tries to make matters worse by having her undress while saying slowly, "I consent." Cleric says, "She said she consented. My faith demands that we let consensual love flourish. Me and Rogue can't partake because we're a couple." I say, FML. So we keep bickering while that poor bandit girl is laying there half naked. I keep insisting that we let her go, and Rogue fires back with something that still gives me whiplash. "So you're against sex workers? Sex is a commodity, and this was as freely given as sex work." I say, "No, not at all. I love sex workers, and I would probably accept her offer if the other option wasn't that she dies." Rogue then accuses me of having a double standard because I was happy to kill all of the other bandits that didn't offer up their booty. I could have handled the situation better, and there probably were better arguments I could have made, but I just wanted it to move on. So I said, "Fine, I'll accept her offer and spare her life." So I have my character go back to the girl and kiss her on the cheek and saying, "There, you can go now." And that kinda diffused the whole situation. Cleric thinks it's valid, so we can move on. The only situation so far that truly made me sweat by being put on the spot like that. How would have you handled it? Edit. I don't think the dungeon master took it very seriously. He was grinning the whole time during the argument, from what I could see on the camera. Edit 2. It was clear from the start when I joined the group that sexual themes would happen, including possible non-con stuff, but at the hands of the baddies to other NPCs. Well, that is a really uncomfortable spot for the dungeon master to put the players in. It's almost like he wanted OP to perform the act under the threat of death towards that NPC, and it didn't help that the other players were egging OP on to do so, or else they would just kill the NPC. And then for Rogue to accuse OP of being against sex workers because of this is just really stupid. Thankfully, OP thought on their feet and was able to just kiss the NPC's cheek and then let them go. Though I would suggest having a talk with the group about why that made you uncomfortable, and hopefully they'll be mindful to try to avoid that type of thing happening again. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.